Holland, and today I will be interviewing John as a former president at Clackamas Community College. This interview is a project of the Oregon Community College Association, and it is intended to create a record of recollections of former community college presidents and other leaders in the state of Oregon. And so I am going to begin asking some questions of John, questions that have been prepared by the Oregon Community College Association. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thanks for asking.
John, when did you first decide to get involved with community colleges and why? It's going back a couple of years.
I read a book, and I can't remember the name, about this new thing called a community college. This would have been about 1964, 63. And I decided that I wanted to do that. So at the time I was superintendent and principal of the Harrisburg Union High School. And I quit that job and put my family in a truck and a car, and we went down to Berkeley, California, because that's where they trained. It was one of the very famous places for community and junior college trainees.
So you left your job in Harrisburg to go to the doctoral program at Berkeley without any more knowledge of community colleges than what you read in the book and were on an adventure.
Well, I had been thinking about it. Yeah, it was an adventure, of course, and my family thought so. But I had 4 kids at the time.
John, there are a lot of people that sometimes refer to community colleges as junior colleges. And in your view, what is the difference between a community college and a junior college?
Well, that was it was called a community college before just the same time almost as I came here. And I think the difference is that a community college is more open to all kinds of training, of work, labor type, automobile, welding, and all that sort of thing. Whereas a junior college more typically is just the first 2 years of most of your 4-year colleges. And we had an opportunity to broaden out the program. We could do a lot of things with senior citizens and with people that are very young who are maybe just out of high school or maybe not even out of high school, and do a lot of stuff with them.
So the community college would be more comprehensive than...
Yes, quite a bit more, than your typical junior college.
Okay, so you completed your doctoral program in Berkeley. What was your first community college work experience after you finished?
Right here, Dean of Instruction.
And can you tell us a little bit about your first position and what was involved with it?
Well, first thing I was the 5th person to be hired. Bill Ryan, the long-term business manager, was the 4th person to be hired. And as the Dean of Instruction is my title, and I had to see what classes we should and could offer and find the teachers and the other support staff that it took to make all that function. And went to work and drew a lot of bit on my California education. We were there 2 years, full-time student, and met a lot of other guys, almost entirely guys at that time especially, that were headed for the same way. And that's how it happened.
So you were the 5th employee at Clackamas Community College, which means you were hired before the first quarter began, probably.
Oh, yes. So. And I had the first teaching staff. I think there were 17 of them that we had. There's a picture somewhere around here of them.
So how much lead time did you have before the first classes started?
Oh, not very much. It was late summer when when I came here to start in, and we had had a month, 6 weeks,
What did you have in terms of facilities?
nothing.
Nothing?
What we did, the first classes we had were held in the evening at the then new high school in Gladstone. And that was where the first classes were held. And then we also held classes very soon in the big church, Methodist church in Oregon City here. By that time, we had some trailers parked on this place, on this campus.
So you did own this campus, even though there wasn't anything on it?
The first president was a guy from California whom I had met when I was a student there. And he got the site and hired the first few people, and after the end of his first year, and then somewhere into his second year, he quit, went to California to be a president of a community college down there. His wife was a Californian, he had a California background, and so he went there. And I became acting president. Then that summer and fall, they hired another gentleman to be president. And when he was halfway through the year, the next year, they fired him. And I became president then. And I stayed on for the next 15 years or so. Yeah.
So was it about 2 years after you were hired you became the president?
Yeah, it was during the second year, yeah.
Meteoric rise to power.
Well, it was only one step up, actually.
How prepared were you for the presidency at that time, do you think?
Well, I thought pretty good. Of course, I've always had a lot of self-confidence. It's probably apparent. and I had learned a lot about them in 2 years at Berkeley. We had all kinds of seminars and classes and things going on. And after the first semester, I had my choice of 4 or 5 different jobs at Berkeley. And so I participated in those kinds of things and got into community colleges down there that way, working. And I had studied well and read well, and I got here and I knew quite a bit about Oregon stuff because I'd been a teacher and an administrator for about 8 or 9 years before I went to Berkeley. And I had served on the OEA School Finance Committee. I think about my 4th year in education in Oregon. I was appointed to a 5-year term on that committee, and I was chairman of it for 2 years. So I knew quite a bit about how to finance schools in Oregon.
So when you became president, though, John, you would have still had a piece of ground that didn't have buildings on it, right?
Well, it had some temporary buildings on it, yeah.
So did you pass a bond measure to do your first serious construction?
Oh, yes. That was the thing we had to do most of the time, was passing issues. We had not only to pass a bond issue, we had to pass an operating issue every year before we could go. And I counted them up, and I think I'm correct in saying that we had 30 or 31 money elections the first 12 years. Sometimes there would be as many as 4 to get an operating levy. And
some people who joined Oregon's community colleges later on probably don't understand that there were times when September was rolling around and you still didn't have an approved budget.
That's right. Well, I never got that bad quite, not September, August. I remember one, I think it was I'm not sure what year it was now, but we had 4 elections to get a budget, and the 4th one we passed. And we got a sign put up over here where the road where the highway came into the campus, and it said, "Yes, we're open." And I've got a picture of myself. I was standing by it like this out there while the cars were going by. So that was a very hard part of it, and I was able to do that partly because I had the experience of being on the OEA School Finance Committee, and I knew a lot about how schools are financed and how to get them done and how to take care of the money and so on.
So, in your first few years as being president at Clackamas, maybe I already know the answer to this question, but I'd like to hear it from you. What were your biggest challenges?
The biggest challenges were always getting money, and then working with the board. The first board had people on it who really didn't know much about community colleges or junior colleges or even education, and they all were people, or most of them were people who didn't hesitate to speak their mind and had some ideas and things they were interested in. Some of them were, well, not much help, but we were able to maintain a majority of 4 at least on the vital issues. I remember one board meeting where there was only 4 board members there. And the guy who was always after me all the time was a psychologist from, he had a practice in business downtown, Portland. And there were only four board members, and he introduced a motion to fire the president. And 3 of them voted for it, and 1 guy didn't. So it took 4 votes to do it. Because it wasn't a majority of the board, you see. It was just a majority of the people present at that meeting. But he was a real problem, and later on he left, and later on he killed himself downtown in his office. Put a pistol in his mouth and shot out the top of his head. He was a real problem.
So did you have any difficulty in the early years assembling a faculty, or did you?
No, that wasn't a problem. We had, should have brought a picture. I have a picture of the first, I think it's 17 teachers that we had hired. And there were enough applicants and qualified, and I thought good, and they almost all turned out pretty well. Some of them lasted a long, long time.